Valentine's Day was supposed to be special, a day to celebrate love, to bask in the comfort of knowing you're with someone who truly sees you. For me, it was the day my entire world shattered. My wife, Amanda, and I had been married for 12 years. Our relationship had its highs and lows, like any marriage. But lately, things felt off. She was always busy, glued to her phone, smiling at texts she never explained. I ignored the signs because I didn't want to believe them. Love makes you stupid, blind. You see the best in someone, even when they're stabbing you in the back. That morning, I woke up early and made her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with extra syrup. I even brewed her favorite hazelnut coffee. Our kids were at a friend's sleepover, so I imagined a peaceful, intimate morning. She came downstairs, visibly surprised, though not in the warm, appreciative way I'd hoped. Her expression was strained, almost annoyed. "Thanks, you didn't have to do all this," she said, barely meeting my eyes. I brushed it off. "I wanted to. It's Valentine's Day." She nodded but didn't sit down. Instead, she claimed she had a work emergency. On a Sunday, on Valentine's Day, I tried to stay calm. "Amanda, can it wait? I made breakfast." She avoided my gaze. "It's urgent. I'll be back later." I watched her grab her purse and practically bolt out the door. That's when the first crack appeared. Hours passed. No calls. No texts. Just a sickening emptiness. Around noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I called her office. Her assistant, a sweet woman named Sarah, answered. "Amanda? She's not working today," Sarah said cheerfully. "It's Valentine's Day. She told us she had special plans." My heart stopped. "Are you sure? Maybe she came in for something urgent." "Nope. We're all off today. Corporate orders." I hung up, numb. Every possible explanation ran through my mind. Maybe she went shopping. Maybe she was planning a surprise. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. I tried calling her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Again and again. I felt trapped in some twisted nightmare. By 6 p.m., panic turned into desperation. I grabbed my coat and drove aimlessly, scanning the streets like a lunatic. I checked her favorite cafe, the mall, even the park where we used to walk together. Nothing. Finally, I ended up outside her best friend Rachel's house. If anyone knew where she was, it would be her. Rachel answered the door, her face a mixture of confusion and guilt. "Is Amanda here?" I asked, barely keeping it together. Her eyes widened. And no. Why would she be? Something about her voice, the way she avoided eye contact. I knew she was lying. Before she could close the door, I stepped inside. "Rachel, I'm not playing games. Where is she?" She hesitated, guilt practically written across her face. Then, she sighed. "She's at the Hilton." The Hilton? A hotel? My chest tightened like a vice. She's meeting someone, isn't she?" I whispered, the words tasting like poison. Rachel didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The silence was louder than anything she could have said. Without another word, I turned and walked away. My vision blurred with rage, hurt, and betrayal. I drove straight to the Hilton, fueled by adrenaline and despair. I needed to see it for myself, to confirm what my heart already knew. When I arrived, I parked across the street, waiting like a predator in the shadows. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then I saw her. Amanda emerged from the hotel lobby, laughing, with a tall, well-dressed man. She rested her hand on his arm, the way she used to touch me. It felt like someone had gutted me with a dull knife. I wanted to scream, to charge across the street and confront her, but I couldn't move. My whole world crumbled right there, watching the woman I loved love someone else. I sat frozen in my car, watching Amanda and her mystery man like a silent, unseen spectator in a twisted play. They stood by his sleek black BMW, their bodies close, faces lit with intimate familiarity. She was supposed to be mine, not his. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every rational thought told me to drive away, to preserve whatever shred of dignity I had left. But rage and heartbreak kept me rooted to the spot. Then it happened. He leaned down and kissed her. Full of passion, like something out of a cheesy romance movie. She melted into him, her fingers tracing the back of his neck, the same way she used to touch me when we were in love. I felt physically sick. My chest burned like someone had lit a fire inside me. Before I realized it, I was already out of the car, striding across the street, anger drowning out everything else. Amanda! Her head snapped toward me, her face draining of color. For a split second, she looked like a trapped animal, caught in the headlights of a speeding car. James, she whispered, stepping back like she couldn't believe I was really there. The man frowned, clearly sizing me up. Who the hell is this? Her husband. My voice was ice cold, shaking with suppressed rage. His eyes widened, but he quickly masked his shock with a cocky smirk. Look, man, this isn't what it looks like. Shut up. I took a step closer, fists clenched. Get in your car. Now. He hesitated, glancing at Amanda as if waiting for permission. She nodded, her face pale and terrified. Without another word, he climbed into his car and sped off, tires screeching. The street fell deathly silent. Amanda took a shaky breath, struggling to meet my gaze. James, I can explain. Explain? I hissed, barely able to control my shaking voice. You disappear on Valentine's Day, lie about a work emergency, and I catch you making out with some random guy in front of a hotel, and you want to explain? Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I'm so sorry, she stammered. It just happened. Who is he? His name is Mark. He's a client. I laughed bitterly. A client? You're screwing a client now? She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's not like that. It was just a stupid mistake. A mistake? I stepped closer, towering over her. How long, Amanda? How long has this been going on? She sobbed, shoulders shaking. 6 months. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. 6 months. Half a year of lies, deception, and betrayal. Why? My voice cracked, raw with emotion. Why would you do this to me? To us? Her gaze dropped to the ground. I don't know. Things between us, they haven't been the same. I felt lonely, 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 as if I hadn't been there, loving her, sacrificing for her, working to give her the life she claimed to want. My heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. You could have talked to me, I said hoarsely. You could have told me you were unhappy, but instead, you chose this. She reached for me, but I stepped back, disgusted. Don't. James, please. I trusted you. I spat, venom dripping from every word. I loved you. You threw that away, for him. Her sobs deepened, but I felt nothing but hollow emptiness. This is over, I whispered, each word like broken glass in my throat. You and me. We're done. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her tear-streaked face. No. Please, James, we can fix this. I'll end things with Mark. It meant nothing. Nothing? I laughed bitterly. You risked our marriage, our family, for nothing? She collapsed onto the pavement, crying like her world had just ended. But she'd ended mine first. I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing in the dark. I drove without a destination, the cold night air biting through the open car window. The echo of Amanda's sobs haunted me, but I shoved the memory aside. She didn't deserve my pity. Not after what she'd done. My mind replayed every moment from the past 6 months. The sudden late-night meetings, the guarded phone calls, the distant stares. All the signs were there, but I'd been too blind, too trusting. I pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the dark. The place was almost empty. Just a tired waitress behind the counter and an older man nursing a cup of coffee in the corner. Perfect. I slumped into a booth, numb and drained. A waitress appeared with a practiced smile, placing a worn menu in front of me. Coffee? She asked. Sure, I mumbled. Food was the last thing on my mind. As she poured, I stared at the swirling black liquid, wondering how the hell my life had spiraled so fast. Just this morning, I'd been making Valentine's Day pancakes. Now, I was alone, a broken version of the man I used to be. The waitress hovered, sensing something was wrong. Rough night? You could say that. She nodded sympathetically. Heartbreak? I let out a hollow laugh. Something like that. She gave me a knowing look. People only come here this late when they've got nowhere else to go. She wasn't wrong. Hours passed. I stared out the window, lost in thought. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. I pulled it from my pocket, expecting a flood of messages from Amanda. But there were none. Just one missed call, from Rachel. I hesitated before calling her back. She answered after the first ring. James, thank God. Are you okay? I clenched my jaw. No, I wasn't okay. I was as far from okay as I'd ever been. What do you want, Rachel? There was a pause, then a shaky sigh. Amanda's a mess. She's been calling you nonstop. She's terrified you'll never come home. I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest intensifying. She should be, I said coldly. James, she made a horrible mistake. Don't. My voice was sharp. Don't you dare defend her. I'm not, she whispered. But she loves you. Even if she screwed up. I laughed bitterly. Loves me? She destroyed me, Rachel. She killed everything we built together. For him? Rachel's silence was deafening. She knew I was right. After a long pause, she said softly, You need to talk to her. I've said everything I needed to. Please, just come home. If not for her, then for yourself. I ended the call without replying. By the time I returned home, dawn was breaking. The house was eerily still, dark except for a faint light coming from the living room. I stepped inside cautiously, half expecting Amanda to be waiting, but the house was empty. Then I saw her. She was curled up on the couch, still in her dress from the night before, tear-streaked and broken. Empty wine bottles littered the coffee table. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something, pity, regret, maybe even love. But I crushed it. Amanda stirred, blinking blearily at me. The moment she realized I was there, she scrambled to her feet, sobs threatening to spill again. James, you came back. I stood frozen, every emotion warring inside me. Love, hate, anger, sorrow. I came back for the kids, I said coldly. Not for you. Her face crumpled, and she sank back onto the couch, shoulders trembling with silent sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice cracked and raw. I'm so sorry. I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. Sorry doesn't fix this. She nodded, wiping her face with shaky hands. I know, but I'll do anything. Please, don't give up on us. Her desperation cut deeper than I expected. She looked so small, so utterly broken. But then I remembered that hotel kiss, her fingers tangled in his hair, and my heart hardened again. You gave up on us, I said quietly. Not me. She dissolved into sobs, crumbling like a shattered vase. For the first time in hours, I felt nothing, just cold, empty resolve. I turned and walked toward the guest room, leaving her sobbing alone in the dark. The next few days felt like living in a war zone. Every room in our house was haunted by memories that used to be comforting but now felt like cruel reminders of what was lost. Amanda tried. God, she tried. Every morning, she woke up early, cooked breakfast, cleaned the house, and even set the table like it was some twisted version of Leave It to Beaver. But none of it mattered. You can't fix betrayal with pancakes and clean laundry. I avoided her like the plague. Our conversations were clipped, reduced to practical matters. Bills, groceries, who would pick up the kids from school. Every interaction felt like walking on shattered glass. Late one night, after the kids were asleep, she knocked gently on the door of the guest room. My room now. James. Her voice trembled. Can we talk? I stared at the closed door, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to throw something, anything, to shatter the barrier between us. But another part, the one still tethered to the past, told me to listen. Come in, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside, clutching her hands together like she was holding herself together. She looked small, fragile. I just wanted to explain. There's nothing you can say that I haven't already heard, I snapped. You cheated. You lied. End of story. She flinched but pressed on. It wasn't supposed to happen. I was lonely, James. We were drifting apart, and he made me feel seen. Seen? I barked out a bitter laugh. I've been right here the whole time. You just didn't want to look. Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. Don't. I stood, pacing the room. Don't you dare use that word. You don't love me. You can't love someone and do that. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I pressed on, fueled by months of pent-up anger and hurt. Was it exciting? Sneaking around, lying to my face? Did you even think about what it would do to me? To us? No, she cried. I didn't think. I was stupid. You're damn right you were. We stood there, breathing heavily, the air between us crackling with unresolved pain. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said quietly, almost to myself. I don't even know if I want to. Amanda sobbed harder, crumpling to the floor like a broken doll. I'll do anything, she whispered. I'll go to counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I stared at her, feeling nothing but numbness. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to feel again. But all I could manage was cold detachment. Good night, Amanda. I turned and walked out, leaving her sobbing on the floor. The following week, I moved back into the master bedroom. Not because I wanted to, but because the kids were starting to notice the distance between us. They asked questions, innocent, gut-wrenching questions I wasn't ready to answer. Why don't you and Mom sleep in the same room anymore? When is Mommy coming to Grandma's with us? I couldn't tear their world apart. Not yet. They were still too young to understand how fragile everything had become. So, I played along. I smiled. I pretended. But Amanda and I both knew the truth. Every night was a silent war fought inches apart in the same bed. We slept with our backs to each other, trapped in a marriage that felt more like a prison sentence than a partnership. One night, I woke up drenched in sweat from a recurring nightmare. Amanda and him, tangled in sheets that weren't ours, laughing like I never existed. I rolled over, only to find her lying wide awake, staring at the ceiling with hollow, tear-filled eyes. I can't sleep, she whispered. I sighed, rubbing my temples. What do you want me to say, Amanda? I want us to be us again. That version of us died the moment you walked into that hotel room. Her breath hitched, and she nodded, accepting the painful truth. I miss you, she said, voice trembling. I closed my eyes, hating how much those words still affected me. I miss who we were, I admitted. But I don't know if we can ever be that again. She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling against mine. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't pull away. The silence between us wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, filled with memories of what we'd lost, and the faintest flicker of what might still remain. The days that followed were like navigating a minefield. Amanda tiptoed around me, desperate to avoid anything that might set me off. I could see the guilt weighing on her like a chain, dragging her down. Good. Let her feel it. But no matter how much anger I carried, there was a part of me, God help me, that still cared. It disgusted me. I hated that even after everything, I still noticed the way her hair caught the sunlight or how she chewed her lip when she was nervous. Some nights, after the kids went to bed, she'd sit on the edge of the couch, eyes red from crying, waiting for what I didn't know. An apology? Forgiveness? Salvation? She'd get none of those from me. One evening, I stopped by a local hardware store to grab a few things. I needed to stay busy, anything to keep my mind from spiraling into memories I couldn't escape. As I browsed the aisles, I heard someone call my name. James. I turned, coming face to face with someone I hadn't seen in years, Melissa, an old flame from college. She hadn't aged a day. Same warm smile, same sparkling brown eyes that used to make my heart race. Melissa, wow. It's been forever. She smiled brightly, setting down a bag of garden soil. I thought that was you. How are you? How was I? My life was in shambles, but I couldn't exactly say that. I'm managing, I replied vaguely. her brow furrowed with concern. Everything okay? Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, frowning slightly. I should get going, but it's really good to see you. We exchanged numbers, an innocent gesture, but as I watched her walk away, I couldn't ignore the familiar warmth her presence stirred in me. For the first time in months, I felt something other than anger or sadness. Something lighter, something hopeful. When I got home that night, Amanda was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at an untouched glass of wine. She looked up, eyes flicking to the hardware store bag in my hand. "Late run?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Needed a few things." I brushed past her, but she stood, blocking my path. "James, please." Her voice cracked. I can't keep living like this." "Like what?" I hissed. "Like someone who finally has to face the consequences of their actions?" She winced, tears brimming again. "I know I messed up, but I'm still here. I'm still fighting, even if you hate me." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. She was still here, despite the hell I put her through, despite the cold indifference I wielded like a weapon. But was it enough? Later that night, as I lay awake in bed, my phone buzzed. I reached for it, expecting another pointless spam email, but it wasn't. It was a message from Melissa. "Hey, it was really nice seeing you today. Hope you're doing okay." I stared at the message, my heart pounding with something dangerously close to want. I typed back before I could stop myself. "It was good seeing you too. I needed that more than you know." Her reply came almost instantly. "Coffee sometime? Just to catch up?" My fingers hovered over the screen, temptation gnawing at the edges of my mind. For once, I wanted to be the one who mattered, to be seen. But as I stared at the blinking cursor, I thought of Amanda, her broken, tear-streaked face etched into my memory. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. The war inside me raged on. The days passed like a slow-burning fuse. Amanda and I lived in a fragile truce, cordial but distant, our conversations reduced to logistics about the kids and the house. I could see how hard she was trying. Family dinners, handmade notes slipped into my work bag, quiet apologies whispered when she thought I was asleep. But every effort only widened the chasm between us. Because no matter how much she tried, I couldn't forget. One Friday evening, after picking up groceries, I ran into Melissa again, this time at the local coffee shop. She was sitting by the window, sipping a latte, lost in a book. I should have walked away. I knew I should have. But something about seeing her there, peaceful and unaware, drew me in. Before I realized it, I was standing at her table. "Hey, stranger." Her face lit up with a genuine warmth I hadn't seen in, well, forever. "James, twice in 1 month? Must be fate." We laughed, falling into easy conversation like no time had passed. It felt natural, too natural. We talked about everything: work, old college stories, mutual friends we'd lost touch with. For the first time in months, I felt like me again. Time slipped away until the barista called out that they were closing. Melissa smiled, hesitant. "This was nice," she said softly. "Yeah, it was." Neither of us moved. The air crackled with something unspoken, something dangerous. Before I could overthink it, I said, "Walk with me?" Her eyes widened, but she nodded. We wandered through the quiet streets, talking about nothing and everything. The weight on my chest lifted, just for a little while. We stopped near a small park where the streetlights cast soft glows on the empty benches. The night was still, charged with possibility. Melissa hesitated, her gaze lingering on mine. "You okay?" I swallowed hard. "No, not really." She stepped closer, her expression tender but guarded. "I'm here, if you need someone to talk to." I could have kissed her right then. God, I wanted to. But guilt clenched around my chest like a vice. This wasn't fair. To her, to me, to anyone. "I should go," I whispered. Melissa's face fell, but she nodded. "I get it." Before I could stop myself, I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. She leaned into my touch, just for a second. "Thank you for tonight," I said, stepping back. She smiled sadly. "Anytime." As I walked away, every step felt heavier than the last. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. Amanda was asleep on the couch, wrapped in an old quilt, her face soft and peaceful, like she hadn't been carrying the same unbearable weight I was. I stood there, watching her, torn between past and present, between love and resentment, forgiveness and betrayal. She stirred, blinking sleepily. When she saw me, her face lit up, the same way Melissa's had. "Hey," she whispered, sitting up. "You're home late." "Yeah." "Ran into an old friend?" She nodded, her smile fading slightly. "You want to talk about it?" I hesitated, really seeing her for the first time in what felt like months. The woman who'd broken me, but who was still here, still fighting. For me. Without a word, I sat down next to her. She shifted closer, resting her head on my shoulder like she used to. For the first time in months, I didn't pull away. The next morning, I woke up with renewed clarity. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that sharpens your mind like a blade. Amanda had ripped my life apart, but crying about it wasn't going to fix anything. If she thought she could walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wasn't going to heal. I was going to dismantle everything she held dear. Slowly, carefully, completely. I started small, pretended to soften, showed hints of vulnerability, letting her believe she still had a chance to fix things. I let her think that, with enough effort, we could rebuild what she'd burned to the ground. It worked like a charm. She clung to every smile, every nod, grasping for scraps of affection like a drowning woman reaching for air. She thought she was earning back my love. Fool. While she played house, I played the long game. Every sweet word, every forgiving glance, I used them all to manipulate her. Her guilt made her predictable, controllable. First, I dismantled her support system. I confided in her best friend Rachel, pretending to be a broken man searching for closure. I spun stories about how much Amanda's betrayal had destroyed me, how I wanted to forgive, but couldn't trust her anymore. Rachel ate it up, horrified at what Amanda had done. It wasn't long before she distanced herself from Amanda, blaming her for my suffering. With Rachel gone, Amanda's social circle started crumbling. Her once supportive friends faded away, either out of disgust or awkward discomfort. She noticed, of course. Late one night, she sat on the edge of our bed, her face twisted with confusion. "James, why doesn't Rachel talk to me anymore?" I shrugged. "Maybe she's just busy." The uncertainty in her eyes was almost delicious. Next, I targeted her career, the one thing she prized as much as her image. I knew her company's biggest client was a firm owned by a man who owed me a favor. It took one carefully worded, anonymous tip to send her biggest deal into a tailspin. Amanda came home that night, stressed and overwhelmed. "I might lose the account," she confessed, near tears. "Everything's falling apart." I held her while she cried, comforting her, whispering reassurances, promising that we'd get through this together. It was almost too easy. The final piece was financial. I drained every joint account we had, slowly, subtly, transferring funds into a secret offshore account she couldn't trace. Meanwhile, I maxed out her credit cards with luxury purchases she didn't make. I kept the statements hidden, knowing she never checked them, until it was too late. The house, the car, her prized designer wardrobe, everything was leveraged under her name. She wouldn't realize she was drowning until the water was already over her head. On a cold, gray morning, 3 months after she shattered my world, I woke up before dawn, packed a single bag, and walked out the door without looking back. Before leaving, I scattered every shred of evidence I'd gathered about her affair. Printed photos, love notes, hotel receipts, across the house like confetti. I pinned a single note to the fridge. "You took everything from me. Now I've taken everything from you. Consider us even." By the time she woke up, I was already gone. The wind howled through the empty parking lot as I drove toward the state line. My old duffel bag in the backseat, stuffed with just enough cash and clothes to last a while. I didn't care where I was headed, just away. By now, Amanda would be waking up to the ruins of her perfect life. I could almost hear her scream when she saw the scattered evidence of her affair, the drained bank accounts, the foreclosure notices, and the shattered remains of her carefully curated world. I pictured her face when she read my note. You took everything from me. Now I've taken everything from you. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure. As the miles stretched on, I couldn't help but think back to our last normal days. Those fake, quiet nights when she clung to me, pretending she still loved me while texting him. The memory made me grip the steering wheel tighter. No more lies. No more apologies. She thought she could play me, but she didn't realize she was playing against someone with nothing left to lose. I'd loved her once. Deeply. Stupidly. But love was dead. And so was the man she betrayed. Back at the house, her house now, though it was practically worthless, Amanda would be coming undone. I imagined her staggering through the wreckage of our life, piecing together the full extent of what I'd done. There would be no lifelines, no friends to run to. Rachel hated her now, and most of her former friends had long since ghosted her, thanks to carefully planted rumors. Her job? Gone. That big client she was counting on? Pulled their contract after I whispered a few well-placed lies. Her savings? Evaporated. Every cent funneled into accounts she'd never find. And the cherry on top? Mark. The idiot she'd wrecked our marriage for had already moved on to his next conquest, a much younger, much dumber assistant. She was truly alone. I pulled into a quiet motel just off the highway, paid in cash, and checked into a room that smelled like mildew and lost dreams. It was perfect. My new identity was already secured. Ethan Blake, an entrepreneur, with no past and no ties to the world I'd left behind. As I sat on the edge of the creaky bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Amanda's screams, her tears, her despair. It was all behind me now. She was behind me. For the first time, I could breathe again. With nothing left to tether me to my old life, I hit the road before dawn, leaving behind everything I'd ever known. No more broken promises, no more lies. Just the open highway and a future I'd rebuild on my own terms. Revenge wasn't just sweet, it was freedom. The house was freezing when Amanda woke up. She reached out instinctively, expecting to feel James beside her, but the sheets were cold and empty. "James," she called groggily, but the silence was deafening. She stumbled out of bed, heart pounding. Maybe he'd gone for a walk, or needed air after another restless night. But something felt wrong. She made her way downstairs, rubbing her temples. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. That's when she saw it. Papers littered the living room floor, hundreds of them. Photos of her and Mark, screenshots of text messages, and even a printed copy of that hotel bill. Her breath hitched as she fell to her knees, frantically gathering the damning evidence, hands trembling. Then she saw the note, bold, black letters scrawled across a single piece of paper taped to the fridge. "You took everything from me. Now I've taken everything from you." The room spun, and she clutched the counter for balance, gasping for air. "No, no, no, no." She grabbed her phone and dialed James's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Again and again. Panic clawed at her chest as she texted frantically. "James, where are you? Please come back. We can fix this. I'm sorry." But the messages remained unread. Shaking, Amanda logged into their joint bank account. Empty. Savings? Zero. Heart pounding. She checked the credit card statements. Maxed out. Her phone pinged with a new email from their mortgage lender. The subject line read, "Final foreclosure notice." Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed onto the cold tile floor. Everything she'd built, her home, her career, her life, was crumbling around her. And there was no undoing it. Desperate, she called Rachel, the only person she thought might still care. The line rang and rang, until finally Rachel picked up. "What do you want, Amanda?" Rachel snapped coldly. "Please, I need help," Amanda sobbed. "James, he's gone. He took everything." There was a heavy silence on the other end. "Good," Rachel said icily. "You deserve it." The call disconnected. Amanda let out a guttural scream, throwing her phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, just like her life. Meanwhile, I drove through a sleepy, rain-soaked town miles away from Amanda's crumbling world. The old duffel bag sat in the passenger seat, stuffed with everything I needed: cash, IDs, and a gun I hoped I wouldn't have to use. The past felt like a distant memory now. Amanda's tears, her desperation, her betrayal, all burned to ashes. Revenge wasn't just satisfying, it was freedom. For the first time in years, I felt alive. And Amanda was nothing but a forgotten chapter. Days stretched into weeks, and I slipped deeper into the shadows of my new life. Every trace of James, the devoted husband, the provider, the fool, was gone. Now, there was only Ethan Blake, a man with no past, no attachments, and no mercy. I stayed on the move, switching motels, paying in cash, and never staying anywhere long enough to leave a trace. The only souvenirs I kept were the memories of Amanda's inevitable breakdown, her reckoning. Back in the hollow shell of our former home, Amanda was unraveling. The utilities had been shut off, and the foreclosure notice had become official. Mark, the man she destroyed our marriage for, had ghosted her the moment her world imploded. He'd moved on to someone younger, flashier, more useful. Her car had been repossessed, her credit destroyed, and her once thriving real estate career lay in ruins. No clients, no listings, no future. The mighty, untouchable Amanda, reduced to nothing. She tried calling her parents, but they were done enabling her self-destruction. Her friends were long gone, thanks to whispers of her betrayal that I'd carefully planted. She was alone. One rainy afternoon, as Amanda sat in the empty house, cold and broken, her phone buzzed, a blocked number. With shaking hands, she answered, "Hello?" Silence crackled on the other end. Then, a familiar, cold voice spoke. "How does it feel to lose everything?" Amanda gasped, dropping the phone. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she scrambled to hang up, but the line had already gone dead. Her chest heaved with panic, her mind spinning. Was that James? She dialed the number back. Nothing. Disconnected. For the first time in her life, Amanda felt hunted. Meanwhile, I parked my car at a rundown diner in a no-name town, sipping a black coffee while planning my next move. I was far from done. I hadn't just wanted revenge. I wanted Amanda to feel trapped, paranoid, and utterly powerless. A sudden inspiration struck me. I reached into my duffel bag and pulled out an old prepaid phone, the last burner I hadn't destroyed. With practiced fingers, I typed a simple text to her number, the only connection I'd kept alive. "I see you." I hit send and tossed the phone into a passing garbage truck, watching it vanish beneath piles of waste, just like her shattered life. I imagined her reaction, the panic in her eyes, the helplessness clawing at her throat. For the first time in years, I smiled. Amanda jolted awake to the sharp buzz of her phone vibrating on the floor where she dropped it. Her hands shook as she snatched it up, heart pounding like a war drum. One new message. "I see you." Her breath hitched. The air in the empty house felt thick, pressing down on her chest like a vice. Was he watching her, right now? She stumbled to the window, yanking the curtains aside, scanning the dark, rain-soaked street. There was nothing, just the eerie stillness of a lifeless suburb, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. Paranoia consumed her. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car, every shadow in the corner of her, I felt like him. She stopped sleeping, afraid he might be waiting just outside, watching. Out of desperation, she filed a police report, but without proof or a known location for James, there was nothing they could do. The officers suggested she stay with a friend or get out of town, but Amanda had neither. Her old life was gone, along with anyone who ever cared. The messages continued, sporadic, unpredictable. "Did you think you'd get away with it? Still wearing that fake smile? I'm closer than you think." Sometimes there were calls, silent, cold, dragging out each second like a blade against her sanity. One night, after another sleepless vigil by the window, the phone rang again. She answered, voice trembling. "James, please stop this. I'm sorry." Silence. Then, his voice, low, venomous. "I'm just getting started." The line went dead. I tossed the prepaid phone into the ocean after that last call, watching it sink into the dark, endless water. Amanda was trapped now, in a prison of her own guilt and paranoia, exactly where she belonged. The motel where I was staying felt like another temporary stop in my long journey away. Every passing mile stripped away the last shreds of the man I used to be. I'd burned my old life to the ground. Now, there was nothing left but freedom. Weeks later, Amanda hit rock bottom. Malnourished, exhausted, and racked with fear, she finally broke down in the dark, empty house she could no longer afford. In her delusional state, she thought she saw me, standing in the shadows, just beyond the kitchen window. Screaming, she bolted from the house barefoot, running into the pouring rain, searching the empty streets for a face she hadn't seen in months, but could never escape. "James!" she cried, voice hoarse and desperate. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But only silence answered. Amanda spiraled deeper into madness with every passing day. Her world shrank into a suffocating loop of fear, isolation, and regret. She barely ate, barely slept, always watching, always waiting. She sold what little she had left, the last of her jewelry, her designer bags, desperate for money. But even that wasn't enough. The house was set for foreclosure in less than a week, and there was nowhere left to run. One stormy night, after hours of restless pacing, her phone buzzed one last time. "It's time." Her knees buckled, sending her crashing to the floor. Cold dread seeped into her bones. This wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Driven by panic, she grabbed a rusty kitchen knife, clutching it like a lifeline. She paced the darkened house, trembling, every creak of the old floorboards echoing like a sinister footstep. Then came the knock at the front door. Slow, deliberate. Amanda's breath hitched as she stumbled toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw the outline of a dark figure standing just beyond the porch light's reach. "Who's there?" she shrieked, voice cracking. No answer. Just silence. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. She stared at the screen through tear-blurred eyes. "Goodbye, Amanda." She let out a guttural scream, yanking the front door open, ready to confront her worst nightmare. But the porch was empty. Just the howling wind. Just the rain. No one there. Amanda collapsed, sobbing, realizing the horrifying truth. He never needed to be there. He'd already won. While Amanda crumbled into nothingness, I was miles away, driving toward the coast under a starless sky, the cold wind whipping through the open windows. I'd finished what I came to do. I'd stripped her of everything. Her money, her reputation, her career, her mind. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, one I'd carefully constructed with lies, shadows, and fear. Revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about erasing her, making sure she'd never recover. Stopping at a remote beach, I stepped out of the car and stared at the vast, empty ocean. No past, no future, just freedom. I pulled out the last keepsake I had, our wedding ring, worn and scratched but still cold and heavy in my palm. For a moment, memories flashed. Our wedding day, the promises we'd made, the life we could have had. But that man was dead. With a flick of my wrist, I hurled the ring into the crashing waves, watching it vanish beneath the dark water, just like her. As the wind howled around me, I turned and walked away, leaving behind everything. No guilt, no regrets, only silence.